cut him out. This year, you haven't got your thing up here.
Oh, they've been doing.
I don't know, sometimes. We know you're here, Jeff. Right, we all got it. Yeah, the wee slide thing at the top, usually. You can. I'll let you work that out, Jeff. Okay, welcome to this workshop around the state of the environment. We'll just we do have one apology. I take it Linda was not here, she was apology. So I'm happy to move that apology to my second. Yeah, David, we'll both say on.
Aye.
Yeah, Karen. Right, we'll move on. We're just heading straight to Karen. Yes.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Lead away.
I just get that presentation going.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I'm not going to put you and Andrea. Presentation is it?
Stay with me for a few.
They shit on you on. So as Ewan is pulling up that presentation, I will just explain why we're in this workshop. So for those that were at the briefing in July, you will recall that we had, you will recall that we.
Thank you. Good. Try that. Sorry.
You will recall that we are looking to get more direction from council on how we balance our effort across our various science requirements, and this come off some learnings from a High Court decision of a couple of years ago that tested a part of the Resource Management Act, which hadn't really been tested before and involves some, I guess, some pretty key takeaways for us that we're now trying to implement. So really looking to you to get the presentation up.
I'll set to go objective and get it and then share my screen with this.
So what we're planning to do today is we are going to do a brief recap for those that weren't there in the briefing, very quickly go through that, and then we are going to look at how the science program is currently balanced and get some direction from you in terms of how you might want that to shift in future.
I don't know how to access objective from this laptop, sorry.
To me, I might better get it. Sorry, I don't.
You just want to run through what
I was going to say, you've got the printouts, which doesn't work for live stream very well, but
so just in regards to just we've got about an hour.
That is the goal, is to do this within an hour, but we can spend a little bit more time if you want to dig deeper.
Yeah.
And Ewan, maybe if you start on the book, because this is really handing over to you at this point to do the recap, and I'll work with Andrew with the presentation.
Yeah, sure.
Going.
Yeah, so if you all just open the slide decks you've got in front of you.
Everybody's got that.
So I'll briefly look over to the slide that says 8th of July briefing recap. I'll start here. So really, just going back over what we covered previously in the briefing on the 8th of July.
Karen, hang on. We're going to speak on these for just make sure everybody's got one. So I can go.
Eric says I've got one on.
You're
It's not. Thank you, beautiful.
We're on the same page.
So why are we doing this reset? So we covered this a little bit previously. One of the major triggers for this was, of course, the court case from the Environmental Law Initiative versus Environment Southland around wetland management in the Southland region. And that course, case, I guess, highlighted some potential shortcomings in how Environment Southland had undertaken its statutory obligations, particularly around Section 35 of the RMA. So, of course, we wanted to look at the outcomes from that case and take a step back and reassess our science and monitoring programs to make sure that we are legislatively compliant going forward. We, of course, also want to, in the face of local government reform, take a look at our science program and make sure that we are as best prepared and placed as we possibly can be for whatever that reform looks like going forward. And we've also experienced that the expectations and demand on science and monitoring have been changing over the last few years due to changing legislation and other perceptions on what science should be delivering and how. So we want to, again, take a relook at our program and have a wee reset and make sure that we are well placed in that space going forward. So the work so far, we did a bit of a baseline assessment of our current science program and the effort and investment into different parts of that program, and also how, I guess, that effort is distributed across our statutory obligations. For example, we are required to do monitoring of our environment. So how much of our science effort goes into that particular part of our science versus we're also required to do assessment of our plans and actions and how well they're performing. How much of our science is spent in that space, for example. So we took a look at that. We also have been working to compare ourselves to some other councils in that particular regard as to what their distribution of effort looks like across the different types of science that they do. And so far, we've been also collaborating with other councils, who many of which are undergoing similar processes at the moment around reviewing their science and monitoring programs. So, just to recap, a quick summary of our, I guess, baseline assessment of our current science program. We have quite heavy investment and effort put into our long-term environmental monitoring. It's understanding our state and trends across our environmental domains. We have a strong amount of investment and effort in our operational role, particularly in hydrology and our flood warning network, and understanding our water resources and allocation of those, and also in some work we do around public health information. We identified that there is less sustained effort and investment in plan and action effectiveness, so understanding how well the plans and actions that this council undertakes are working or are being effective, and also in causal understanding, so understanding the causes and or sources of environmental issues that we see in the region. We identified that there are growing requirements and needs from planning and policy implementation, and understanding socio-economic implications of council's decisions, and climate change, natural hazards, and understanding future risks. Another point worth noting is that reporting and data systems are critical. So these, I'm kind of talking about our backroom processes and systems which help our team and the science information program to run. These are, of course, very critical, but easy to underestimate and undervalue because they aren't necessarily seen as specific programs with outward-facing outputs. So moving on to the next slide, which is the graph you can see there. This was a bit of a depiction of our assessment of effort across some different science types and or council functions. So on the far left, you can see that the group there, we've got state trend and pressure monitoring. So this is the work that we do to understand our environment, to assess states and trends. And you can see that we put quite a lot of effort and investment into that particular type of science. But so do the three other councils that we looked at. So we kind of line up quite well in terms with other councils in that area. And across those different science functions, actually, our pattern of distribution of our effort is relatively similar to the 3 other councils we looked at. For example, we can look at the work that we do in understanding causes of environmental issues is comparatively less to the other types of science that we do, but that actually matches with some of the other councils. And I guess this points to a bit of a blueprint that councils have been following in the last 20 odd years around how science programs are developed and what the focus is on. And many councils across New Zealand have followed a similar blueprint. So this work is not being done in isolation. So there is collaboration work going on. If you can flick over to the next couple of slides. And there was a video circulated which goes into the, I guess, background information and reports and collaborative work that's going on in New Zealand at the moment around this. So if you'd like more detail, please refer to that video. But essentially, there's work going on at collaboratively across councils and also nationally, looking at how science programs or science parts of councils and organisations can evolve over time or perhaps should evolve to deal with these changes and requirements being placed upon them. So there are a few reports there which were quite key sources of information for this. And again, if you'd like to read or hear more about those, please refer to that video. So today, we're really seeking direction to help us prioritise or redistribute perhaps some of our science investment and effort going forward to make sure that Environment Southland Science is as well positioned as it can be a key asset for both this organisation and whatever local reform may look like for the region going forward. So we thought we'd come back to some of what we've heard already, which is mostly council feedback that we've heard already. And that was around, there is interest in moving beyond just state of the environment reporting and monitoring to better understand causes, solutions, sources. A desire for science to help show whether plans, rules, actions, and interventions are actually working. We have heard that public trust is important, including how to respond to challenges to that council information. The current strengths were recognised, and these included our long-term monitoring and data records, real-time hydrology data, the technical expertise within the team and the institutional knowledge, the rigour that the team follows when producing work, and some useful reports such as a recent nitrate report from earlier this year. There is more information sought on sediment, estuaries, wetlands, land use, contaminant sources, and potentially the use of citizen science and remote sensing. So how do we apply this, feedback that we've had already in a way that is easy to help focus our science program going forward? So we've decided to try and use council priorities and areas of council function, important council function, to focus this conversation and use it as a starting point for identifying some potential science-focused areas. So these are areas where we could consciously put more investment and effort to specifically support council priority areas. So we'll explore that today and see how that might influence the change and distribution of our science effort going forward. And off the back of that, we will go away and develop some levels of service for our science programs to feed into the LTP process. And the idea is that they will balance our mandated legislative requirements, making sure we meet what council has to do and also balanced with council objectives and priorities.
I have 2 questions. Sure. One question was, you suggested that there was a court case that revealed some deficiencies in our system or our approach. That suggests that there is a certain amount of our science investment that should be considered as non-discretionary. We are expected to do it regardless of whether we want to or not. So we don't really have a choice. So I would kind of categorize that as non-discretionary investment, whereas there's possibly a portion also of our money that is discretionary. We can choose where we want to invest. Any sense for our current sort of budgets, how much is tied up in non-discretionary science? And how much, therefore, do we have as wriggle room to use or apply differently? Or is that unfair?
No, I think that's a very good question. It's one that we've been exploring. I think that, so one of the learnings from that decision was that where the law says you have to do something, you have to do it, and not being able to afford not to do it's not a reason not to do it. But what the law doesn't say is to what degree do you need to do things. So the discretion is really around how much effort you might want to put in to meeting legislative compliance. So to provide an example of that, for instance, you might want to argue that for surface water quality, to get a sense of the state and trends, you might have a network of 10 sites versus 60 sites versus 600 sites. That's where the discretion lies. So in the past, what's tended to happen is over decades, LTPs have really been set up around domains, so air, water and land, etc. Now, science has to do a whole bunch of work across all of those domain areas. And what that has meant is it's made it a little bit less visible for councillors to really understand where the decision making has gone into how the science gets spread across those different domains. And so we're trying to kind of flip that on its head a little bit with this process today, which is and appreciating that you've already done a lot of work to feed into the LTP in that domain-based space. What we really want to explore now is where the priority effort might broadly sit, I guess, in terms of different council priorities, which kind of align to council function areas, that'll help us get that level of discretion right. And that's what we will come back to you on.
So it makes absolute sense that science, I can understand why it's followed domains, because we are required to plan and deliver the plans, air plan, coastal plan, with an impact. And I can understand why science would be for support that planning function in terms of informing what should be in the plan and then how effective the plan might be. That's my second question, therefore, was kind of a follow-on from the court found us wanting in respect of the Resource Management Act obligations. With new legislation on our doorstep, will those obligations change? And will we need to be prepared to, we can adjust based on what emerges around the new Planning Act and the Natural Environment Act, because it might ask different things of us, or might ask someone else to do those things in the future.
I think that is a really good point, and that is also very much what we're looking to. To date, there's not a lot of substantial change in Section 35 of the Resource Management Act, which is under which most of this work sits. So at the moment, the question of who does it in future is an entirely different one. So the time horizon we're looking at here is just a 3-year horizon for that reason.
Right.
And because, we don't know what's going to happen after that point. But irrespective of, I guess, of legislation change, we believe that science and monitoring is a regional asset, and we want to get that asset in a good shape for whatever comes next. And so that is why we're also really keen to explore that with councillors.
So the basis that the environment doesn't change, we can kind of plan ahead saying these will still be environmental things that some of these can attend to.
That's my understanding. I've not seen any suggestion that this type of work doesn't continue. The form in which it might continue is obviously up for question, but we want to make sure that its value is understood, and particularly because this is a function that's not something that the territorial authorities do and have. So that kind of puts extra emphasis on getting this in the best possible state.
Thank you. Karen, can I ask a very long and tricky question relating to our Finance and Performance Committee meeting this morning, which gives us a report on what we spent,
Yes.
budgeted in areas. And on page 108, we've got water and land science. Last year, the budget was 2,080,000. We spent 2,122,000. This year's budget is 1.79, and we spent 1.3. So the budget's decreased by quite a margin, and the spend's dropped by quite a bit. But there's a couple of areas here which is very concerning, which is coast and marine science is budgeted to spend 317,000, currently there's 79. And that 317 budget is based on last year's budget of 164, when there was only 110 spent. So somewhere along the line, the budget from last year doubled to this year, even though we spent less than the budget last year. And this year we're spending considerably even less again, because we're in fourth quarter. Then we have climate adaptation science, which last year the budget was 505,000, and we spent 291,000. This year our budget is 182,000, which is quite a bit less, and we've actually spent 5,000. So that unfortunately shows that we're not keeping up with our science, or is there something that can be explained from this to say we're still getting the science, it's not being reported correctly? Or maybe it'd be good if you could look at page 108 on that finance and performance agenda and just come back to me with some answers, because there's some pretty big disparities there where you say, you know, we've got a budget of 182,000, we've spent 5.
So I won't go into the specific numbers right here and now, but I can give you a high level answer.
Please do. Well, all of us would be good for all of us.
Absolutely. So
Just going from one meeting to this, one meeting saying, this is what we're spending, and we go, oh, it's not. Then we go into the state of the environment and what we're putting science on to make sure that we're doing the fundamental things correct.
yeah. So there's a couple of things I think that have gone into this. So as you recall, we did a organizational redesign last year, and following from that, I think there's been a little bit of discrepancy in terms of how the budget got realigned. And for instance, looking at some of that, it looks like some of the income's not necessarily gone into all the right pots. So potentially some of those changes are to do with how the budgets and finance have been managed throughout the year. So that'll be one factor, certainly in terms of how the income's been managed. The second factor is around, we did go through a period where we did have quite high vacancy rates in the science team. And what that has done was it kind of delayed our work program. So we always tend to spend a lot in the last quarter, because a lot of our work happens in the summer period and it takes a bit of time for that to come through. So the combination of having some work delayed as well as that increase in the last quarter has meant we've had quite a lot more accrual than we would normally have. So that's another factor. So certainly at least over 150k of accrual in the science budget. So work we did last year, it just hasn't actually come through the invoicing system yet. And the other factor is, and I guess particularly in the coastal marine space, is that we had geared up to do quite a bit of work to support plan processes, for instance, the coastal plan. And with the plan stop and some of the regulatory uncertainty, some of that work did get slowed as well in order to see which shape that was going to take. So that has also kind of picked back up again too. So there's a number of different events that has meant that things did go slow, but have started picking back up again, and we are catching back up. But what I really want to do is get that right for we've done a lot of work to get that right for this financial year that we're currently in. And we really want to make sure that's right going into the next LTP period. So, yeah, we'll come back with the finer detail. But there's, I guess, a number of factors.
As I said, page 108, just have a look.
Yeah.
Finance.
Alison and Jeff, sorry.
Karen, all of that underspend, have you still got that tagged so as you actually spend it where you were going to spend it? Or what happens to it?
So I guess some of the underspend is a timing factor, I guess is what I'm alluding to.
Timing factor doesn't matter to me. Is that money going to come back and be spent on what it was intended to be spent on?
Yeah, so that's, I guess, at the prerogative of the councillors and the executive. But I don't actually think, in terms of when we dive properly into the numbers, that there'll be that much of a substantial underspend. I think most of the underspend will be in staff time, as opposed to the operational type things like contractor budgets and some of that programmed work. In terms of where we would intend to spend it, like I said, so things like the coastal plan, what we're doing for the coastal plan, that did get slowed, but it is picked back up again, and so it is still being spent on what that was put in to be spent on.
Okay, I'm not quite sure that I've got my answer, but it doesn't matter.
Because I'll come back to you with a finer scale.
Yeah, I think so, because what we're getting is a whole lot of money not spent, and then is it going to be spent on what it was set out to be spent on? The other thing is a supplementary one. As a non-discretional budget, are we spending 50% on that, 25%? What have we got to play with if we're looking at changing what we're going to do?
So we've got some slides that explore that as we move into this. So we're going to show you a couple of examples, I guess, around how we might shift things around in a minute.
I'll take Jeff.
Thanks, Chair. Karen, look, would it be fair to say that some of the climate change modelling work that you've done over the last year or two, is that necessary to keep doing that modelling work, or are there portions like that that could be dropped off your work program going forward? Because once you've done the modelling of anything like that, it's pretty much consistent, isn't it?
Yeah, so what went into the long-term plan for the 3-year work program for that was year 1 was supposed to be the climate projections. There were considerable delays to that, which meant it wasn't actually delivered until year 2. Year 2 was supposed to be taking those projections and then looking at climate risk and doing some risk assessment work. So that has been delayed because we needed the projections first. But then it was also one of the other things, key pieces of work there was doing a natural hazards stock take and developing a bit of a plan for how we would strategically address some key information needs going forward. And so that stock take's been underway, and we have actually started working on some of those key information needs as well. So again, there's just been a few delays, a little bit outside our control, but we're still, I guess, across the 3-year LTP work program, we're still working our way through what we had laid out to do.
Right.
But you're right in terms of we're not redoing the same work each year.
And just probably a similar sort of question is that if is there science, I mean science is science and against science, but actually saying no matter how much science in certain areas, things aren't going to change in the next 10 years or or is it critical to know that to carry on that, to have that continuing line of science from a certain aspect of things, but that there are elements of the science project that, hey, if we put more emphasis on, we can get a better outcome or better clarity. That's going to have the biggest effect in, say, the environmental outcomes. So have you ever looked, and that's maybe going to be talking about prioritising it, but have you done that As in, okay, we've got a budget, we're business as usual. But if we say we want to know where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck to get some real good changes, whether it's the social aspect or, really enhance that. And some of this actually, I'm not saying, I'll just pick one, like the estuaries are not looking too good. And they probably won't look too good for the next 10, 20 years because it's going to take a long time to change. But that, I'm not taking away from that, but trying to say focus the money on where we can get the bigger influence on the outcomes of the estuaries rather than just keep on monitoring a real bad problem.
So yes, we do. We do
sort
that.
of challenging the system.
Yeah, so we do that. So for instance, we've been progressively dialing back some of our air quality program in order to support some of the, the increase in focus on flood warning, for instance. So I guess though my concern is, and this is kind of one of the learnings out of that High Court case, is that it tends to kind of sit under the radar. And so part of what we're trying to do today is to actually get some direction from councillors around that we will then go away and translate that into what that will mean for this program and bring that back to you, rather than that kind of being done under the surface, so to speak.
But sometimes you'll know better than us.
For
That's
sure,
what I'm
we'll
saying.
take
We
your
need that-
direction.
We need that information. So
Yeah.
yes, this is how we feel. I know everything's important to the scientists within their own department and things, but it's actually at some stage, okay, where's that best bang for buck? But almost.
We all know the tributaries of the Mataura. We all know.
I know, but I'm just saying there are some. I'm not taking away from the issues. Just saying, okay, we need to really, what we really going to have to make it very clear in certain areas, because some of the science won't change the outcomes for those spots for many, many years.
Absolutely. So we will do that and we will make a call on that. But I guess part of what we're trying to explore here is there are different types of science, and we've not really explored that properly before. And we want to get a steer on actually what do you see as the greatest type of science that gives you the greatest value as governors, and we'll use that then to help do exactly what you said.
Carry on.
Welcome. You got one.
Okay, so just bringing it back a step, we've back to this idea of going back to council priorities, which largely align with significant council function areas, and can we identify some areas where we could focus our science effort or investment to help support those particular council priorities. So this table lists those on the left-hand column. And then on the right, we have identified some potential science focus areas where we may look to increase effort, depending on direction we receive. So for example, this will take a little bit of just working through, so bear with me on this table. For example, flood resilience, obviously identified as a council priority area. What science could we do as a potential focus area to help support that particular priority? Well, it might obviously be improving our flood forecasting systems and the resilience of those systems. So the idea there would be that we would be doing science to help support adaptation planning and improved flood preparedness for our communities and for Southland in general. So that might look like supporting Kanoa projects, for example. It might be something as specific as developing online flood forecast dashboards and applications, having our information more visible. So it might be improving our telemetry systems and hardware and the infrastructure of and building in more resilience and more redundancy into our systems. So there's the kind of science that we would put more effort and investment into to support that particular council priority. Next one down, so healthy catchments and ICM. What science might we do to better support that, or to focus on to support that in a more focused way? Well, that might be around catchment decision support. So this might be science that's directly targeted at supporting communities in, for example, using mitigations more efficiently and effectively. So this could be science that's targeted at or allows us to do really good scenario modelling of possible actions, how they might influence environmental outcomes in our catchments. It might be updating science information summaries for particular areas. It might be developing tools to specifically target certain actions and or doing monitoring to assess whether those actions are actually working or not. So it's science that's specifically targeted at supporting that healthy catchment priority. So the next on this table here is resource management reform. So this basically a couple of examples there: environmental limits and spatial planning. So we know there's a lot going on nationally with regard to reform in this space. A lot of that work, this kind of gets in a little bit to what Phil was touching on, is mandated. We will have to do this. It's not, it's not up for discussion, I guess. It's not optional. But there are degrees to which we can put effort and investment into doing that. So we could do the bare minimum, or we could develop an enhanced planning and decision support science program where we increase our effort and investment there to better support our policy and planning and implementation of that national resource management reform. So that might look like developing better locally calibrated models to help us to support decisions, policy and planning decisions. It might look like putting extra effort investment into our water allocation tools and understanding how that fits in with our policy. And it might look like doing localised and bespoke modelling for natural hazard or future risk scenario modelling to understand what the risks there might be for the region, or to understand the impacts of policy on socioeconomic outcomes in different catchments or in the region. So again, it is science that we could focus on to support that particular council priority. The next one down in the table there is being legislatively compliant, which is obviously a council priority. That's actually highlighted green because we sort of thought, well, that really is all mandated work. We have to do that anyway, so we'll probably just park that one. And the bottom one there is around the foundations of council and being transition ready for what local government reform may look like. So how might we invest in effort in science in that particular area? Well, it would really be about getting our house in order, making sure that we have all of our data well quality assured and quality checked and available online through open access or dashboards, making sure that all of our systems and standard operating procedures and business continuity plans are as good as they can be, so that we are very well set up for whatever transition may look like. And it's really around, again, positioning our science function as an asset going forward for this organisation and for the region and for whatever the need may be given where local government reform goes. So going on from that then, if we were to take one or two of those particular science focus areas as examples, that yes, we want to put some more effort into that area. So in this slide, we've got the flood resilience and highlighted in pink there, and the being transition ready highlighted in orange. If we were to try and conceptually see what that might look like in terms of redistributing our current effort to fit that extra work in, we can have a bit of a crack at doing that in a conceptual and indicative way. This slide shows our effort across our different science programs. So they're programs you recognise along the bottom there, our freshwater ecosystems work, flood warning and hydrology, estuarine marine, for example. This is a real reflection of our current effort based on our baseline assessment that we have done. So if we wanted to put more effort into improving our flood warning forecasting work and the resilience of that program, we might try and redistribute some effort from some areas, for example, freshwater ecosystems or our science reporting and engagement work, in order to allow for more investment in our monitoring and data handling, for example, which would be required to boost our flood warning system, And of course, obviously, our flood warning and hydrology program would need extra investment. Similarly, to make our science program transition ready, we would likely need to invest in our monitoring and data handling in terms of making sure all our data is well QA'd and QC'd, stored appropriately and labelled, and our SOPs are all up to date, and our our house is really in order for whatever a transition may look like. So this is just an indication, but gives you an idea of how we may redistribute or reprioritise our effort. Or another example might be that we decide to put more effort into supporting healthy catchments and not integrated catchment management, or providing an enhanced level of service and for our resource management reform and supporting policy through the next few years. So that may look different in terms of how we might redistribute that effort across our science programs. Again, we would need to redistribute from effort from where it currently is in some cases. For supporting planning and resource management reform, we may need to invest more in our science reporting engagement and our integrated catchment science, for example. And of course, perhaps in our climate and natural hazards and our water resources, to support integrated catchment management. We might want to need to boost some of our effort and investment in our land sciences to help develop decision support tools for catchment groups or people in catchments who are making decisions about what to do on their land to achieve better environmental outcomes. So we've come to where the rubber hits the road, I guess, and that it would be a little bit of an activity to let you provide some direction and feedback on which of these possible science focus areas you think are relatively most important, and then to also give us some feedback on what key deliverables you think under each of those focus areas would support you as councillors or the organisation the most over the next 3 years. So around the room at the moment we have some posters, and on each poster is one of these science focus areas. And in front of you there should be some tape with red dots on, and each person should have 8 red dots in order to allocate. We would like you to assign those red dots to the poster above the dotted line, and that would be indicating your how important you think, relatively important you think that particular science focus area would be going forward in the next 3 years. So you can allocate your dots to just one, if you like, all of them to one. You can split them all evenly across the floor if you think they're all equally as important.
We can give them away.
Yeah, well, discuss trading. And then underneath there is a specific question. So what key deliverable from science would support you most over the next 3 years? And there's post-it notes and pens, and we would like you to write down what you think that key deliverable is. Please try and keep it to your key one. You're allowed to put up 2 if you really have 2 that are absolutely important, but it's really that key one, and post that up underneath the question there too.
Got a couple of quick, hang on, David, got a couple of hands there and then.
Look, Ewan, don't get me wrong. The world is changing really quickly, and what we're going to have to live by and survive by and become reasonably, I was going to say rich, but just to keep going, is to change. Now, the point that Phil made down there is what portion of this is non-discretionary, then we can change the rest to make our Southland community sturdy, strong, and environmentally effective. Until we get that, because I'm going to say, right, I'm going to put a line through there, and we've got all this extra time and things to do on things that are important to getting our community and our environment right. Because some of this stuff probably needs to change.
Yeah, that's significant. I guess we could have gone away and redefined our effort and investment to how we, the science team, think, what is absolutely discretionary and what's not. in isolation of your guidance, or what we've chosen to do is come to you and seek some direction around where you think the broad priorities lie in terms of what's going to help set this organisation up best in the next 3 years. We can take that and let that inform us about how we specifically would design programs to meet our minimum legislative requirements. And if there is anything left over, then we know kind of where we can design to put that.
Not sure if this is the right knowledge base.
I'll just quickly, Jeff, and then Dave.
Thanks, Chair. Ewan, look, I'm interested if you could just explain to me improved flood forecasting, because in my mind that reminds me of perhaps just a straight out weather forecast. To me, yes, all of those river monitoring stations and so forth are absolutely vital for Southland when it comes to flood resilience. But also it's those flood banks that need to be kept up right up to scratch, and the clearways in the river, because I know that there's several piles on the Rowan Ridge door there that some of that could be cleaned out. So does all of that come into what you're thinking about in terms of improved flood forecasting?
I guess
What I really just want layman's terms of what you mean by.
I'm not a flood forecaster or a hydrologist, but what I do know is that there is what we do now in that space, and there is always more that we could do to better support Environment Southland's ability to make our communities resilient to floods. And there are specific things to our program which we could perhaps improve, and for example, how we display the information that we currently have, whether we made that more accessible through a live dashboard or an app or something like that, which some people have requested or thought is a good idea. And there's wider expansions to that program that could be made too. And I know Karen might have a few more thoughts on that. She's been involved in the development of that program recently.
So I guess what we're kind of asking is, as a governor, this is a organisation that is investing a lot in flood infrastructure. Would you like the science program to supplement that investment by increasing our science capability in that same space so that communities are better prepared and better forewarned about floods? Now, I guess we're not necessarily asking you today to tell us exactly how we will do that. That's what we will go away and spend some time working through. And I should also just add that how we might get there is not just necessarily spending Environment Southland's resource, it's also how we might partner with others and how we might attract investment into the region. So, but I guess kind of feel like we can't do it all, and certainly can't do it all in an increased effort way in the next 3 years. So we're just looking for that high level direction around where do you think the biggest benefit area is for us to focus in on, and that's where we'll go away and do some more work.
I think you just quickly.
Yeah, look, for me, it's around the real data as opposed to the model data. So around flood resilience, I've recently come across people buying houses and stuff and having trouble with what some of this projected stuff's saying. And so, I live on a floodplain. At the extreme, you'd say, well, you can't build on a floodplain, and it affects people's livelihoods and that, and it's all based on assumptions and stuff. So how much of this is actual real data and how much of this is going to get into modelled and making judgments and computers building stuff that may or may not be right? So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
I think this is what we're trying to tease out from you, what is valuable to you. So I think if you feel that actually that flood is actually a highly valuable space, but within that you're really specific that actually it's real data that is most valuable, then that's what we're asking you to put on the sticky and just add that additional context for why that's where you've gone. And that'll inform the work we'll do.
Yeah, so just quickly, understand where you're coming from. A lot of the stuff like improved flood forecasting. There's a lot of work getting done collecting data nationally that a lot of other bodies and stakeholders and people are doing. What we're really looking at is regionally how we can do that, but also from there is learn from all of the forecasting for weather forecasting nationally for the next decade is coming from how many different departments in the government or how many different whatevers to help us come to a better plan for our improved flood forecasting. Whether that also includes LIDAR and the build-up of gravel and the changes and the integration of that catchment side of things as well. Yeah, the science part probably, and say that one, is just collating and pulling everything together and then try and get an answer from it. Because a lot of the work's been done. We just need to collate it.
That's great. Then all we're asking is just put that on the sticky and let us know that that's what you feel we should be doing. So I think if we.
Yep, no, I've got a question, but I'll Marcus can answer it.
Yeah,
Mark, sorry.
so we're going to do this quickly.
Yep.
And so before we do though, I do just want to introduce the, so we'll have a person at each poster for you to ask questions. I do want to introduce my two science managers who you may not have met. So I have Ash down the room. Ash was a scientist and has been a science manager for about the last year. And John Jury, who's recently joined us, who's a bit of a soils and land guru actually. So very, very delighted to have him on board, and also has a lot of experience in fresh water. So they're also going to be around just to help help things through. So my suggestion is we just maybe go for 10 minutes and see where we're at. And we'll be at the posters. You've got 8.
Second planning question.
Just trying to get me to do it. Karen, have you got anything?
Thinking about
What's wrong?
I can't count, just keep following now.
You don't get any data. You're out.
How many of them?
Yeah, so we put that poster up. Somebody taller than me.
Right on,
clearly.
yeah.
You got a wee extra.
How could you inseminate a cow when you can't even put a sticker up there?
Get somebody else to do it, like, yeah. I have to.
Yes.
Plenty of people here.
Well, let's not stop, stop.
Animals, yeah.
What's for you?
No, I don't need to worry.
The first time I've taken protection on this. Well, we've been freezing here for months, here we.
Yeah.
Well,
Is anybody doing?
You can't do everything. What have we got there?
Populated completely.
We can run our own systems. Yeah, no, I.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we need to communicate. Yeah, well, I think it's just embracing what we do now and ensure that that's in the science field and ensure that that's transferred into the new. There's some continuity.
What you've got to know, what do you think it might look like on the site, so making sure that ensuring that
There's continuity.
Is it the first cut?
I think you're focus on
The last few talk day, but I'm not going to wrap it off with you.
Karen at this point. Oh, yeah, it's like, how do they know? Yeah, so if you means that probably kind of piece.
And it was a glitch on the computer.
One would hope you wake up.
No, it was a glitch. I was reading the lecture on music.
I'm sitting down. You could have asked me.
Years and years and years.
Yeah. Never updated.
And I think that
Yes,
Carving that stuff from my Like if everybody's maybe, well, Carol, we can always add a couple after that.
So do you reckon the one that is sold pretty acre?
We might
Whether anybody's going to read it.
just, oh, hang on. Morris has put a message on the workshop. My phone.
quite nice to know this side.
Because they don't see
Roger, Roger. Sorry to interrupt you. We'll sit down and, well, Ian, while I understand. Okay, I'll just read what Morris, you've got that. As someone might post the notes, we go to water quality improvements, the ways to improve water quality where it is not as good as it could be. I would also want to understand soils better so we can identify risk activities on those soils, so we can take actions to reduce those risks. All of the science where extremes are important, so they all need to be done to some extent. National coordination to ensure efficiencies is important. Your messages there, someone, I know. So we'll take note for that, someone. So Karen, do you want to?
Yep, so,
We're just going to wrap up. Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of wrapping up, it's pretty much what we've been saying. We're going to take this feedback away and come back to you either through the LTP process or more directly, because some of this we might not wait until the LTP to kick off. So we will work through that and report back. Do you want to add anything? yeah, just thank you for your time.
Anybody got any comments or anything? Everybody happy? If you've got a late post-it note, allow you to put it up there.
I still make a point. We've got to get where that discretionary line is, and then we've got to change a whole lot of things going forward. Because if we're going to do what we're going to do with the environmental issues, we've got to have information there that's accurate and quick, or we will not get support.
Just to share the really obvious outcome from talking to the public at the weekend that engagement opportunity was the tube that filled up with fluffy balls, fresh water tube stood out as the one that was getting the most attention from members of the public, for better or worse. So yeah, that would seem to indicate that the public have a real interest in attending to our fresh water challenges.
Just going to have to say that on Sunday it was a different tube, but there were lots of netball girls going through, and of course once one started filling up, they all.
And what was the tube?
It wasn't that one. I think I'm trying to look for someone that was there.
Someone told me this morning.
It was a piece. No, it was it? It was a different one anyway. Different influence, but anyway, it was
We were
still.
doing it properly on Saturday.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Have you not casting aspersions on people who play netball?
No, I wasn't
Jim?
actually, but it was quite interesting. We're
No, I
talking
haven't.
about. Sorry, I don't need to talk about it now. It was quite interesting. But it was a good turnout. It was really interactive. That's what I'd say. That people were really keen to put in. There was someone doing a lot of thinking on it too, so it's good. Any other comments?
Just observe that the fact that we're using red dots to vote would indicate that this is the discretionary portion of our investment
Yes.
that we're attending to. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that is not reflected in our red dots that will be the non-discretionary investment that we're doing.
Right. Well, that's all. Thank you very much.
Sorry, John.
Sorry.
In building on that, Phil, I think, the concept of this, the discretionary versus the non-discretionary funding implies an envelope that's static. But I guess my challenge to the team would be to bring to us propositions for what we need to meet our legislative requirements, our internal program decision support, and to, not be shy to say we need more resource to deliver this, if that's the situation, and then for us to be able to make decisions about how we fund, or if we fund, which parts of.
Priorities.
One more thing.
Very quickly, Phil.
Just to observe that the beneficiaries of our investment in science is not just Environment Southland. There are a whole bunch of other stakeholders who would be probably alarmed if we were to cancel or change certain things. So is there a mechanism to also garner the perspectives of other key stakeholders like universities and ministries and departments of conservation as part of this process?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, this is going to be linked to LTP, which goes through consultation. And this is also linked to, what's happening nationally in this space as well. So this is, as we alluded to, is not being done in isolation, and that includes not being done in isolation from, the variety of end users for us. Yeah.
Okay. No, well, and Morris still in line? Take it here. Yep. Staff. Oh, yep. We've read your, and hopefully staff can take your notes.
Yes, I heard that. Thank you.
All good. And we'll wrap it up and like they do. So thank you very much for your participation. Staff.
Thank you.
We're done now.
What would you do?